the podcast that we are tentatively calling the Field Notebook. This episode is going to be a final project for a hunter-gatherer class at UTK. I am an archaeology student. My name is Knox Tabor, and my co-host here is Keller McMurray. Say hi, Keller.
Hello.
Now, I wanted to do this as a podcast rather than just a standard paper for one main reason, and that is public archaeology. My professor for this class talks about it quite a lot, and she has given me that same level of passion for it. It's the idea that archaeology and this hidden past should not just be for the scholars and the people who for the people who pay hundreds of dollars to have their name on a fancy piece of paper. Instead, it should also be for the general public.
Yeah, because the more we know about societies, the more we know about ourselves, and it brings interest into archaeology itself.
Yes, and that's exactly what we want. We want interest in archaeology. That is what keeps us growing. Today's particular topic, though, is about the sand shamanism of Southern Africa. Not South Africa, Southern Africa. That is an important distinction because South Africa is a country.
Sub-Saharan, perhaps?
That's a good point. It's usually just South African.
Yeah.
I don't know if it should be Sub-Saharan because usually they're in the mountains.
Yeah.
But shamanism as a practice. Some people refer to it as like the earliest forms of religion, or at least early religions in growing societies.
Yeah, concepts of a religion.
Yeah, and it's found to be mostly based off of altered states of consciousness, some of which are hallucinogenically induced, we could say.
Yeah, I'm sure they have some interesting things in southern Africa, lots of mushrooms and...
Potentially. I have seen one group that uses a type of vine, but the group that we're looking at, the San, also known as the... I'm not going to try to use the actual African name because it's one of those languages that has a click in it, and I have trouble pronouncing it.
Understandable.
But they are they're just the San Bushmen, or we're just going to refer to them as the San.
Sounds good.
They actually do not use hallucinogenics in their practices, which it could potentially just have to do with the intensity of their rituals.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of religions can be used to explain natural phenomena before we had technology to discover science.
That is a great point, yeah. They commonly did it through spirits. Shamans were ideally like the gate between the individual tribes and the spirit world.
Interesting.
The word shaman, like in sometimes it translates to medicine man, which is something that we see very commonly. It's a very common translation. In their societies, they're healers, they're spirit guides, of course. Some cases, especially in the later eras of this, which we'll get to later, they are political leaders, which I did find very interesting. Because in a lot of them, it's just their job, whereas the women and the children and the elderly, they might stay and gather resources near camp or have some farming subsistence, and the men or the more well-able go off and hunt game. This was just their job.
So would this be similar to the pharaohs in Egypt having a godlike, a divine...
Like a priest of sorts?
Kind of, yeah, but they had like divine ancestry, or they were from the god per se?
They don't exactly have a god, or at least a lot of them don't. That is not to say they don't perceive it. For instance, the San Bushmen, they do in fact have a tiered view of the world.
Interesting.
They would view the sky above as a separate realm, and bird spirits contacting them. The same thing with fish spirits and other animals that live underwater or underground. They commonly view underwater and underground as one realm, if you will.
So this would be more like Norse mythology, with the different realms or different. I can't remember the word, but
Well, even so, it could be attributed to Christianity. Hell below, heaven above.
yeah.
And in some northern tribes, yes, they are. They do have similar views of spirits to the later Norse gods. So I feel, in some sense, there is a connection to later tribes or later religions. There was one source that I read that it talked about early carvings of the Norse goddess Frigg or Freya, and it is a connection to a later religion.
That's interesting because it's really cool to see how different religions play into each other, how they're based off of each other, and how different parts go into different things. Like this religion picks up this aspect and then picks up another aspect from the East and combines it into their own religion, even though they are very similar.
That brings up a great point that I do want to talk about later. But regarding the actual history of these Bushmen, I'm not sure if I said this earlier, but they're largely disregarded when making histories. Most African histories have begun with the black farmers that just came in. And this can be seen through cave art, where we see differences between the San peoples who were there, and just in ways they are portrayed. It seems like the San tend to have longer arms and legs. I'm wondering if that has to do with the dancing poles. It's like stilts that they would use on their arms and legs to maybe make them look more animalistic. In the depictions that I saw, that's what the Bushmen had, whereas the farmers looked more humanoid.
That's very interesting. Could you go a bit more into depth what you mean with stilts and?
Yeah, so that was something that they would do in order to get more in contact with the spirits, to kind of embody them more. It was used strictly for their dances and their rituals. It was a trance dance, which was something essentially to help the shamans get into this mindset to talk with spirits of this other plane, maybe to help understand when the next rain would come, maybe to there was one that I saw where it was to ask permission from the spirit of the hunt to provide good, strong, maybe even just fatty beasts that would serve their tribe well. Yeah, the spirit of the hunt was something I found really interesting because it's not like it's any other spirit. It's not like it's an elk or some creature you would hunt. It was this just beast you would ask permission from, which is something we do see in a lot of different tribes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I like that.
And I like it too. But moving forward, after, we don't really see them a lot in early histories. In the late 1800s, there was a linguist by the name of Bleak. He was going to South Africa to look at languages of the area. And he had heard about the interesting dialect that the San had. Again, it's that clicking language that I can't quite do, and I'm not going to be rude by trying to. And he started doing these ethnographies of the San. Him along with his sister-in-law, who also happened to be his research partner, they became fluent in that language and did somewhat help preserve some of it, but unfortunately not enough. And that language is lost today.
It's unfortunate.
It is, especially since linguistics is such a big part of anthropology. Unfortunately, here at UTK, we don't have a linguistics department, which I'm really heartbroken about.
It's very sad.
I think it is. But yeah, after Bleak, we didn't really see a lot of traction on the Sand tribes for a while. In fact, during World War I, there were anthropologists that went down there, but they disregarded these groups, saying that they were too dumb or too stupid to even just perceive the concept of religion or God. At the very least, in a Christian sense. So they just didn't do it. And we didn't get anything until the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, the disregarding certain cultures because they were not seen as God-worshipping, that's a very old-fashioned way of thinking, and I wonder how many different parts and religions are disregarded and forgotten because of that thinking alone.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it's only been, 150 years and since Bleak went and talked to those people, and now that language is gone. There are still the daughters, when people started going back in the 70s to actually investigate this stuff, there were still daughters and granddaughters of these people. So the culture wasn't lost, but the language was. And that's still happening today. We're still losing these. We're still losing languages because people were too self-righteous about white man ideology.
You could also attribute it to colonization.
Yeah, that's a big point I did mean to make.
A lot of native Irish speakers can't really speak fluent. Well, not Irish, but Irish Celtic. They can't speak Irish Celtic that much anymore because of England. Just eliminating. Ireland's main language is England, and the same thing with Scotland. They had their own Scots dialect that.
I know, which is like a cousin to English, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's more like Old English.
Yeah, that's kind of where it diverged, but I definitely know what you're talking about. So I want to go back to the trance dance and talk about the actual beliefs and practiced customs of these groups. There was one piece of cave art that I found, and it had a great depiction of the trance dance. So the idea was the shaman would stand in the middle, the women of the tribe would sit in a circle shoulder to shoulder, and they would be clapping and singing for this trance dance, while the shaman presumably did the dance in the center. The men on the outside would stomp and clap, and there's no true evidence of this, but at least in my opinion, maybe provide a baseline just because I think it's funny.
Like "We Will Rock You" by Queen.
That's great. What I found really interesting, though, is the cave art depicts children on the outside of these circles. And they would be mocking or making fun of the shaman.
That's interesting.
In these groups, there was no separation between secular and non-secular. So it was not rude or disrespectful to do this. It was kids will be kids.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's very different from what we have today.
Yes, very different from our modern culture. Whereas if I had made fun of a stranger, my mother would have slapped me in the back of the head.
Ditto to that. Now, given that the San shamans didn't actually use hallucinogenics, at least a number of them did. Again, some of them did use that vine I talked about earlier, but even so, that they were a little further north and probably had influence from like mid or northern African tribes that did potentially use hallucinogenics. But according to this, it was still a very dangerous thing, and it's likely just due to me having an outsider's view that I don't understand how it could be dangerous.
Well, I assume you can if it's a psychedelic drug, you can take so many and lose who you are. Think of Sid Barrett from the band Pink Floyd. He was really deep into psychedelics, and he just lost it. He would do the whole show playing guitar, facing the band. His back was towards the stage or towards the crowd, and he would leave mid-show. He was impossible to record with. That's when they picked up the great David Gilmour, and eventually he had left the band to pursue. He ended up recording a couple of his own albums, but it just stopped in general.
Yeah, the loss of self is definitely a big risk when dealing with the hallucinogenics. I'm meaning more in the sense of without hallucinogenics, like the Sand tribes. They do not have these drugs. And perhaps it's just due to plain dissociation. I know in The Mind in the Cave, it talked that shamans were even commonly victims of like seizures, epilepsy, just individual hallucinations.
That's very interesting, because I wouldn't have thought that you can have epileptic seizures or seizures in general from just a simple ritual.
It's largely unknown. Again, we don't have any first-person accounts of these. We just have the archaeological cave paintings, which I'm personally thankful for, at the very least, since we don't have ethnographic accounts.
Yes, I wonder how many religions are lost because of that.
Yeah. And yeah, colonialism, just modernism creeping in. It's a scary thought of how much of of human culture we lose.
Yeah, and there's a growth in atheism today, which is while a lot of kids our age don't really know that much about Christianity if they didn't grow up in a church.
Yeah. Speaking of beliefs and connection to colonialism, when some white people came in and some spread their beliefs, the San Bushmen, they ended up adapting a couple of different Christian tales into their beliefs. The most prevalent one, of course, is the Tower of Babel, which I think is really interesting, considering they have a complicated language. Yeah. In this tale, it brings up contact with these other tribes that are a little further north of them, like the Sotho.
That's interesting. I mean, I think that's a really cool aspect because I might have mentioned this earlier, but different religions play, like you can pick up one thing from another religion.
I believe we did talk about this earlier.
Yes, we did.
Regardless, I definitely see your point. they there are some things that are potentially individually produced. For instance, they have the idea of a trickster god or a trickster spirit, and of course, due to commercialism, I automatically think of Loki due to Marvel Studios.
That is 1000% what I thought of.
Exactly, and yeah, he was the Norse trickster god. So,
or you could even think of interpretations of Christianity's devil.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing earlier, which is not exactly a connection to. I don't know if this was a connection through colonialism or if this was an independent production, which it very well could have been.
I know there's different interpretations through different cultures. Like Goethe had, I believe he had some plays or stories where the devil was a trickster and he would tricks, and then there's two other different interpretations that don't necessarily, they're not really relevant to what we're speaking about right now, but
no, I definitely get what you're saying. But back to these trance dances, they're such a unique thing to shamanism. But we do have cave paintings that depict what happens if they go wrong. So we were talking about kind of losing yourself earlier. There is a painting of two crab-looking figures, and one was larger and much more mystical looking, and one was much smaller, and they used a different type of paint for it. And anthropologists have interpreted this as the spirit world chipping away at the mind of the shaman.
Yeah, I think it is a very human belief that our mind can only take so much.
I can agree with that, especially right now.
With these finals coming up, I 100% agree.
Exactly. But there are also physical things that can go wrong. One of them, it was an account that said if it went badly, his body would lock up and he would be rigid.
Oh, wow.
He would be unable to move as long as the trance lasted, or even after.
That is insane.
Which I personally believe would likely be due to the hallucinogenics.
It could be. It could be your body acting on that.
Yeah.
Your body believes that it's true, so it tries to protect itself, or that's just the side effect of the drug, perhaps. But
my personal favorite, though, it said that if this were to go badly, and he were to lose his mind to the spirit world, then one of the spirits would take over his body, and the particular depiction said that he would grow spines from his back and turn into this lion-type creature.
wow.
Which, that does lead me to something I want to bring up. They do believe... well, hold on, I want to back up a second. These trances, they can be in multiple forms.
Okay.
One can kind of be daydreaming. There's these little arc or rainbow-looking cave paintings. It's an arc on one side and it's a sharp, jagged line on the other.
Okay.
Archaeologists believe that this is an interpretation of the little eye floaties you see sometimes.
Yeah.
And I suppose in a way it might be hallucination. I don't know too much about the biology of the eye. But regardless, its existence in the archaeological record is really interesting.
Yeah, that's very fascinating.
The second type is essentially a dreamlike state, where that is spirits coming to visit you. But if you want to go and visit a spirit, hence a trance dance, you end up nearly on the brink of death.
Wow.
Exactly, which is at that point, when your spirit leaves, a different spirit can come in, and hence, that one I was talking about earlier, where the shaman could potentially shapeshift into this lion-type creature.
That sounds very familiar to a couple of media references that I can't quite think of right now.
I can't quite place any either, but I'm sure it's gone down the line somewhere and someone has incorporated it into something. That's how it goes with any piece of media or religion.
Which unfortunately could be falsely represented due to media.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I want to talk about hunting. In this class, we've learned that a lot of hunter-gatherer behaviors, if they were, perfectly rational beings, which unfortunately humans are not, a lot of these behaviors are based off of subsistence needs, or being able to get the most kilocalories per hour. Now, I really wondered, where does a shaman fit into that? And I found that sometimes, at least in the Sand Bushmen, they are the leaders of these groups, or at least can sometimes lead the hunt, because they would view the hunt as not just a, subsistence journey, but also a spiritual journey.
That's interesting.
It is. A big example of this, Africa is a very dry place, and they would find need for rain, of course.
Yeah.
So a big job of the shamans was to do a rain dance. And afterwards, presumably this rain spirit would form. And in order to get the rain, they would hunt it down, and then after it's killed, its blood would fly into the sky, and it would become the rain that waters the crops.
That's fascinating. It's really cool because that would be considered a sacrifice. Or
I suppose it would, but then again, also goes back to the spirit of the hunt and asking that permission. I wonder if those are separate rituals.
Yeah, and I wonder if they viewed hunting as a coming of age.
Some did.
Ritual, perhaps.
There were separate rituals for instance, when girls would have their first menstruation cycle, and when men, young boys, would kill their first prey.
Oh, wow.
So there were these separate rituals for those events, for special events like that.
That is really interesting. I like that.
I didn't find any evidence or evidence of these other rituals, but aside from cave paintings, we don't have a lot of evidence of shamanistic practices either. The only evidence we would have from a trance dance, it would be perhaps a hearth in the middle of this encampment, a rock surface that's probably beaten up, and then probably some housing nearby. And any modern archaeologist wouldn't think, oh, this is obviously where they did the dances. It would probably just be, oh, this was a camp. I mean, it's around a fire. There's obviously going to be a lot of foot traffic.
There's only so much that preserves, too. And there's a lot, in the archaeological world, there's a lot of misinterpretation, unfortunately.
Yeah, which I would love to have some really solid paleontobotanical remains because that would be such an eye opener
Mm-hmm.
for like exactly like what and how they use these hallucinogens. Even if the San Bushmen don't use them, it would still be great for hunter gatherer culture in its entirety.
Yeah, because not a lot is taught about hunter gatherers versus that we were essentially animals. That's what I was taught back in high school.
Maybe in high school, but we
Great.
do have a class here about hunter gatherers, which this is a final for, and it's all based off the fact that humans are logical creatures and they will do logical things, make logical connections with other tribes, inter-tribe relations. It's just all it's supposed to be very logical about how you go about things, but yeah, it's logical that humans would try to explain things that they can't. Why does it rain? Oh, it's because a beast's blood has been spilled.
Yes, it's
Why is my child sick? Oh, the dead from above have shot an arrow of sickness at my child. That is one of their beliefs. They believe in that higher realm I was talking about earlier. That's where the god, the higher spirits and their families reside, as well as the dead. So they have this form of heaven.
so it seems they didn't necessarily view the dead as the dead and the spirits as two separate things.
No, because I definitely think they viewed the dead as being spirits, considering they are attributed to the spirit world.
Because in, I would say, modern beliefs, but more not, it's like different religions, the aspect of the dead don't necessarily have any control. It's more of the higher forces, the divine forces that cause this, and the dead just kind of sit back and watch.
Yeah, no, I do find that really interesting about the song, though. In later, uh, in later rock art depictions, we do see that shamans, well, in earlier depictions, we see that they are just very similar to the rest of the group. They are not higher, they are not more important than the others. It's just their job. However, in later depictions, there is one where the shaman in the center is much larger, and he has some facial features. He has facial hair that we can see, whereas the others all remain very silhouetted, just very simplistic.
That leads me to think that that might have been when hierarchy was formed, like perhaps the caste system, or something like it.
At least the beginning of it, like a trans-egalitarian society.
Yes.
Trans-egalitarian meaning mostly equal, but there is usually a handful of big men, or like the heads of households.
Yeah, patriarchy, matriarchy.
Exactly. Which does bring me to a good point. It is largely unknown if these shamans were men or women. It seemed to be a very ambiguous role in hunter-gatherer society. It could be men or women. So, could be medicine men, medicine women. I think it just tends to be medicine men in Western depictions due to the fact that we were largely brought up as a patriarchy, as a society.
Yeah. Now, this is a complete, divert from the main topic, but would that be similar to the oracle in Greek mythology? How it would manifest in people? Like this oracle spirit? If I have that right.
Unfortunately, I don't know too much about the oracle spirit.
Well, from my knowledge of Percy Jackson books in middle school, it would come down and it would give a prophecy, and it would tell them that this is going to happen through a person, and then after the oracle spirit left, the person would just be normal again.
Ah,
Like
interesting.
possession.
I think there was some level of just affinity that these shamans had. I don't believe it was a separate spirit, although that is an interesting interpretation that does need some research on my part now.
You're welcome.
Yes, I deeply appreciate it. That means you're gonna have to come back for an episode on the oracles.
I'd love that.
But yeah, the legacy of the San is unfortunately not extremely prevalent in their religion. They have been great examples of subsistence. There are San groups that persist today, and they have been used as examples in Robert Kelly's The Foraging Spectrum. That was the textbook for this class.
Let me see if I'm just seeing if it's right here next to me. Or
No, it's at home. I'm sorry.
Dang.
But yeah, shamanism is just not as prevalent as it used to be, which is unfortunate. Again, between a handful of half ethnographic accounts and a majority just cave paintings. That's almost all of our archaeological evidence for shamans, which is really disappointing in my opinion.
Because I really feel like that could play a different part in how we view religions too. More
Yeah.
shamanism, like how we view the Pope.
Yeah. But yeah, shamanism's role in society is unfortunately sometimes overlooked because, as I said earlier, even just the histories of Africa started with just the black farmers. It's just, in conclusion, the San were very intricate people who had a lot of really interesting beliefs. And it's a shame that we can't get more than just the cave paintings. I want to thank Keller for coming in talking on this little project of mine. Yeah, I'm gonna have to hold you to that Oracle podcast now. Maybe we'll do that next semester or something.
I would like to thank Knox for having me, and of course, I look forward to the Oracle podcast, the next episode.
Oh, is it next episode?
Maybe this is an ongoing thing.
Okay, we'll find out. Thank you to Dr. Hollenbach for teaching such a lovely course. I really appreciate her. And once again, I do this in the name of public archaeology and hoping to share information and interest to the greater public. Thank you for listening, and I will hopefully catch you next time.